are you, Batho?
Welcome to BUA LE BATHO podcast, a podcast where we discuss everything career related. Yeah, so we have you today. Can you please tell us who you are and what you do?
Thank you for having me. My name is Sesame Moroka. I am a project manager. I work for a company called LW Architects. Within that company, I hold the position of project lead. What a project lead is they're a project manager, office manager, and just generally lead all projects from inception throughout to completion, sometimes at different stages as well. Because in architecture and construction, there are about 6 different stages of a project. So at times I'll take it at stage 1, just after inception, sometimes at construction level, sometimes just to supervise at high level throughout the whole entire process. But I have a capable team that works with me, so I'm not always
That's right.
on the ground.
So for you to have been what you're doing now, what did you study?
It's been a long journey. So the very first certificate was interior architecture. I set out to do architecture, but we had financial challenges at the time. My parents funded me for the course. So we settled for interior architecture. But because that was never my end goal, I didn't allow it to deter me from doing what I actually do want to do, which is architecture. I think I was just very lucky and very focused at a very young age. I've always known I wanted to do architecture. So after having studied architecture, I set out to work for different companies in South Africa at the time that did estate management, property management, architecture, and interior design. So I worked part-time, and then ultimately, right after my very last exam, I was able to get placed by the varsity I was at the time in, I think it was a company called TIS Design that worked with Hollard, was subcontracted out to Hollard. So I did junior designer at the time in their property division, and some other work there. Ultimately came back to Botswana and worked in academia. I was a lecturer and head of my modules for, I think, a little under 2 years.
You're still lecturing something to do with what you studied?
Yes.
Okay.
I did, under architecture, there are different modules, like any other subject, right, I suppose. So there's design element, there are building sciences, there's CAD, which is computer-aided design. They're different, So I was lecturing some of those modules, and design being the main. And then I also, I think I did socio-economic head, looking after students. I forget the details, but yeah, I didn't do that for too long because I wanted to open my own situation, which I did ultimately with just 2,000 pula in my pocket at the time, enough to just buy, I think, a table and a few gadgets in the office, and I hit the ground running. But I had a lot of help. I didn't do it by myself. There was a gentleman called Mpobalopi, whom I had a conversation with, and he said, you know what, we could partner up. And his company is or was, I haven't touched base with him in a long time, Native Impressions. Is. Native Impressions, and we basically went into a collaboration, and it was a very teachable moment. I was wet behind the ears. I had a skill, but I didn't know how to run a business. And that's where the hand-holding and mentoring was. Apart from that, I didn't know how to get into a room and broker deals and negotiate. So he was very instrumental in that regard. So the collaboration was, I basically inherited the entire database of native impressions. So all that clientele became my clients. You know, they allowed me that front seat to be able to approach their clients on a one-on-one and sell to them. And their main body is corporate. So what it was is they basically develop strategies, marketing strategies and brand manuals for the companies. And then I then take that brand manual and then reinterpret it into a 3D space. So that is to say, in a simple way, if the company is BBS, BBS has a brand identity that when you walk into the branches, or ABSA, or I'm just thinking of the banks, or FNB, the moment you walk into FNB, you know you're in FNB because there's subliminal messaging everywhere, in the colors, in the way that they design, in the way that the traffic flows. That is all engineered. It doesn't just happen. Yeah, so we reinterpreted the brand manual into a 3-dimensional space. So that was that initial collaboration. But as is any relationship, you outgrow it and you spread your wings even further.
Definitely. So right now, what is it? Is it still the same company, or you went and started something off by yourself?
So because that's a good question. So because I did not know how to run a business. You know, these are two different things. I think we hyper-realize the idea of, I want to own a business. Just because you know you have a skill and you can master a skill. But running a business is such a different language that you need to learn leadership. Some people are born with it. I'm not. You need to learn leadership. You need to learn money language. You need to learn contracts. There's so many facets to running a business that you need to have knowledge of before we get to the skill, because the skill can be acquired, right? So the very first attempt was a really good run, did very well, successful, but because I was limited in my knowledge, we didn't run for too long. You know, it was quite limited, a couple of years. But I was curious enough, and I had enough humility to say, I'm not good at this. I need to take 2 steps backwards and go and learn. So what I did is I went to a company called Bidvest to go and learn how to sell. Bidvest is a multinational company.
Yes.
And without going too much into the product lines, they basically market and sell. That's the backbone of their company. The products are, by the way, but they sell. The marketing and sales machine is robust. So I had an opportunity to sit down with the then manager, who said, you know what, you can come in this time. And I had a little bit enough savings to take that kind of risk, to go and get a job from being a managing director to a sales executive for another company, and just learn. And that was my school fees, you know. That was how I was paying forward my school fees. So I think I spent about just a little under 2 years as well, just doing that and learning how to walk into a room and be confident and selling a product, and learning how to believe in the product such that I'm able to sell it to you, to understand it, to believe in it as well. So it also gave me so much humility that I understood the value in fostering relationships with the security, with the receptionist, right through to the CEO. If I cannot speak to the security guard, sometimes he is the key to where I'm trying to go. So your selling starts way before you before how you dress. That's just part of it. Just that communication was so key. It was such a teachable moment as well. And then after that, I thought, let me get back into it, which I did. I ventured into vehicles at the time. But before then, I went and I spoke to one of my mentors called William Lee, Billy Lee, of William Lee Associates. That's a civil and structural engineering company. Had a great sit down with him and said, I think I know where I'm trying to go, but I'm not too sure what skills I need to acquire. But this is what I want to do, And at the time, the conversation basically was, where I'm coming from, these were my shortfalls. So I outlined my shortfalls, being sales, not being able to understand money, how that works, not being able to broker deals, effectively, not being able to structure contracts that stick without too many holes in them, and constantly needing legal intervention. So then I knew he was doing a lot of, over and above the civil and structural, he was doing a lot of mediation and arbitration. And my curiosity piqued, and I said, I want to know. I want to learn what this is. Can I shadow you for a year? And he said, but what about working? I said, I saved enough. Wherever you go, can I sit next to you? So that's what I did. Again, I was paying my school fees. 3 years. That's a total of 3 years. Mind you, it sounds easier than what it was. That was a lot of sleepless nights because I had to work through the night to actually be able to still pay my rent, right? It was a lot of broke years. I hate to use the word broke, but it was a lot of years that we had to live very minimally, But I had a plan. I had a plan. So I couldn't afford to go to school, but this was the best. High in sight still, I think I would do it again. After William Lee Associates, then I had a sit down with a young gentleman called Leonard Wong. And we went into a strategic partnership, and that's exactly where I am right now.
Interesting. Very interesting. Why architecture?
Why architecture? So it's a little bit long-winded. I grew up a tomboy. I played with my siblings and my cousins, cars and never dolls. So, boys get a front row seat to a very interesting world at a very young age. The cars, they disassemble the cars. So I've always been really interested in how things work and how to build things. So I think, thinking back, I probably started then. I'm also very creative, and I'm an artist at heart. I draw. And that, coupled with my technical curiosity, not necessarily skill at the time, it fueled me to learn more how to build things. I could have probably easily went engineering way, but my science results were not that great. And the thought of doing undergrad science at UB terrified me. So, but I mean, I think I landed exactly where I needed to. It is the best of both worlds. Yeah, it's the best of both worlds. I still would want to try and find out a little bit in the engineering world how structural engineers do their thing, because they make the building work. But yeah, that's it for now. That's why architecture.
So, which subjects do you need to study what you studied?
Okay, so At Form 5, that's what's J? Is that JB?
BGCSE.
BGCSE. You need all 3 sciences. So you need your chemistry, physics, and biology. You would need art because there's a fair amount of art. I think in government there's technical studies as well. I forget what they call it.
Design and technology.
Yeah, design and technology. So that will be your basic.
No maths?
There's a lot of maths. Yeah, so formulas, maths. It doesn't have to be added or add maths. It's called. Basic maths is fine, but you just need to do very well with maths and a little bit of history. A little bit of history will just give you enough of the basic when you get to your next level. Yeah. So I think that's about it. Obviously, I'm disregarding the number of points that you do need to get into uni. Yeah.
Now, looking at the industry and architecture, I'd like for us to read Harold and just get to name the different opportunities let's start first with the different types of it. Like basically the subjects that are covered, and then later on, then you can tell us with a degree or whatever qualification in it, what can you stand to be out there in the market?
Okay, that's a good question. So modules, you're looking at history, you're looking at geography, you're looking at structures, which is the structural engineering. So you basically learn all the disciplines at high level. So a little bit of electrical engineering, just to have a general understanding. You need to have a little bit of mechanical engineering to have a general understanding of how it works. Structures, I've mentioned also. And then history, you need to understand where you're going, to understand where, or where you're coming, to understand where you're going. Yes. Computer-aided design, we're living in AI world now. The world is fast changing. But within architecture, we use computer-aided design. Whereas when I started, yes, there was CAD, but not everybody used CAD. I remember my then boss and mentor, Mr. Dilima Denge, whom I volunteered before I even went to varsity. I actually volunteered at his office for about a year.
He's an architect.
He's an architect.
He's now CEO of BHC.
Of BHC.
Yeah.
Yes. He very generous. I skipped my first year of university because of him. He taught me everything that I knew. So by the time I got to varsity, I already knew everything at elementary. So I went on to my second year because of that. So yeah, I'm trying to remember all the modules that you need to know, but like I'm saying, at very high level, all of those inner workings of a building is what you would learn at school. Then there's the corporate and communication side of it. Your contracts, your FIDIC and JBC, all these controlling instruments that you need. They call them professional studies, I think, if I remember correctly. All of these. But it's interesting how in varsity, that probably takes about 5% of your time. And yet, it is the most important. Those controlling instruments and the professional studies will be the difference between you making money and you sitting at home. But it's so minute. Your presentation abilities, all of those. You can design a great building. If you cannot put it in front of somebody and be able to sell it, it will stay in your computer.
Ivan. So, yeah, tell us more about the opportunities then that exist from studying what you studied.
Yes. The second part of your question was the opportunities. So with opportunities, it's so vast. It's so vast. Coming out of uni, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be an architect or I'm going to be an interior designer. But beyond that, I mean, corporate offers so many opportunities. You can go into real estate. You can be a real estate agent. Obviously, with a little bit boost in maybe 1 or 2 courses, you can go real estate direction. You can go project manager direction. You don't necessarily have to be a technician and sitting at your desk and drawing. You can be be an arbitrator, which is the direction I'm trying to move towards, a mediator within the built environment. You can go into construction and be a project manager in construction. You know, it's vast. It's vast. You don't necessarily have to be. I think you do have to pay your dues by the initial years and be the draftsman or be the technician.
Of course.
Yeah, but as you grow and if you're intentional about it, you can grow in a different direction, which is what I then opted to do, to try and understand further how and the inner workings of a contract, how you make the money, how you negotiate the money, how once it's tools down, beyond the journey of building, designing, construction, once it's tools down, what happens? You know, because there's that as well. Just because we're done with the building does not mean that we completely we leave the site, but you don't leave the project. So you're tethered to it for a couple of years. You need to mitigate that, because that is a risk. If you're tied to a project for 10 years, and in between all of that, a lot happens to the building. You know, that's how you get your profits are eroded. So you need to understand post-contract, those post-contract services, how to limit them such that you mitigate your risk. So those were the things that I was interested in after realizing that these are my shortfalls. If I understand this, if I understand how to negotiate it, if I understand how the money trail works, where it goes to, what percentage goes to who and why. If I understood all of those, if I understand the risk, project risks, your project risks start from your contract, not necessarily on site. There's a lot on site, of course, and there are mitigators for that as well, which forms the larger part of the contract. But it starts when you're signing, before you get to site. Yeah.
What does the future hold for people who want to venture into architecture in terms of security, job security, in the advent of things like AI and, you know, all of this artificial intelligence happening around us?
Yeah.
And also in terms of saturation, Botswana, do we have a point? Are we at a point where there's a mismatch of the skills required on the ground and the actual number of people taking up space there?
You know, your question has so many facades to it. So you're speaking to job availability, job creation, sustainability going forward. I think, in my humble opinion, the past couple of years have been very challenging in construction. Again, in my opinion, our biggest employer has been government for most firms in Botswana. If government is not issuing out any work, it limits us as well. That also, it trickles down. You know, if you're the project lead in the office, or you're the principal architect, you don't necessarily want to keep 7 other people in the office. And again, with CAD or with AI, because that's our AI, CAD, computer aided design, we no longer have offices of 10 people. What 10 people can do, CAD reduces that to 2 or 3 or 4. which is another conversation altogether. What AI is potentially doing or not doing. And I think we probably have a lot of students out that do not have jobs because we're churning out more than what we can absorb, just because the main employer is not issuing out a lot of jobs. Private sector does its bit, which is our main target. I think that was a very smart thing to do, to move away from government and focus on private sector. So there's sustainability. But there are few of those, and there are a lot of us. So there's a fair amount of competition, which is always good as well. But we have the development manager projects that have recently been released by government. Without going into too many details, these are a bunch of projects that are from government that will be managed and maybe developed by a number of companies that have been selected or pre-selected. I think it's about 9. They're not companies, they're consortiums, about 9. Now, the ideal, which I hope will happen, is that they will outsource from subcontractor to domestic contractors, locals, and that will trickle down, and we'll have a little bit more employment and a lot more action on the ground. So I think in the next 4, maybe 6, maybe 7 years, there will be a fair amount of activity and less people on the street. Hopefully, like I said, it's an ideal. With AI, I have a very interesting relationship with AI. I think it can potentially be a young little disaster. But at the same time, Africa, maybe Botswana, is quite young. It's quite young. We're not there yet. I think there are 2 sides or 2 levels of AI. There's AI that aids what we're currently doing to boost either time, turnaround time, etc. So basically, anything that is human prompted. I'll give an example with what we do. I need to input information into the computer for it to give me a wall. So it cannot do it on its own. And whereas...
It's prompt.
Yes, a prompt. So whereas if I was to draw it pen to paper, that would take me, to do a full drawing would take me 2 weeks. I give an example, probably longer. With computer aided design or AI, that building can take me 2 days, depending, again, the size of the building and the intricacies. But certainly the substructure, that can even be up in 1 day, whereas it could have taken me a couple of weeks to have done. So I think that's the positivity in it. As long as we're not replacing the human element to it, again, I think we're very far with regards to that. I recently did some travels, and I went to some Cresta hotels, and the integration of AI is very interesting. I was pleasantly surprised to find in Botswana companies that are intentional about integrating AI into their everyday systems and outside the office. So just that initial onboarding from a distance. I got, I think, a text to my phone to say, hello, hi, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And then I responded back to it. Oh, is it tomorrow? What time is check-in? And it responded back. That was a virtual an artificial intelligent assistant that was responding back. So that gives you a prelude into what you expect when you get to the hotel, and they've got 101 little trinkets that they're now exploring and they're doing was quite interesting. I think some they haven't launched, so I cannot speak to them, but they're doing some great stuff. So I think when you're able to integrate with AI in that regard, and I'm speaking to buildings and architecture in that regard, where it's enhancing service and not necessarily replacing people, I think I could embrace that. I look forward to it.
I think the conversation is multifaceted across several industries, because even in the creative industry, we find that there's different AI generations that are coming. You can prompt it and then do me an artwork in Tinjana. So, you could it creates artwork, it creates videos based on the prompts that you're giving it.
Right.
While many people will be scared that, this thing is coming here to replace us, I look at it as something that, what if then maybe us, the people, the practitioners who are in that particular trade, what if we embrace it instead of now fearing it, and then you start using it to actually cut down on our turnaround times, like you just said. I know of there's one that our Adobe suite actually incorporated. I think it's called Adobe Firefly, which from something like this that we have, it can actually from this conversation, it can actually go and edit this conversation. When it's your turn to speak, it uses the camera that's focusing on you, just stuff like that. Something that would take a person maybe up to 5-6 hours to edit a video like this one. It can do that in 30 seconds or something like that. So to me, I'm thinking AI is not really there to replace us unless if we are really if we leave ourselves to that. And the minute it starts taking up certain jobs within our industries, it's opening up new ones, because now that the entry-level jobs now are taken over by AI, for example. Now it can open up spaces that we can later on get into, things like the ones that you are mentioning, that you are venturing into. Yeah.
I mean, look, we could debate it, but and absolutely, you're right. I think recently I was using ChatGPT. I don't know if we're allowed to
it's perfectly fine.
I was using ChatGPT to do an analysis of a report, just to try it out, and a mediation document that I was studying, to give me a summary. Something that would have taken me probably a week, redlining it, going over and over. That thing produced it within seconds. Within 2 minutes, I had it. It was... And it analyzed it. It went into a lot of intricacies within that document. So 100%. In terms of productivity in the office, that's what it's there for. I believe it's doing its job with regards to that. I think where I kind of disagree or maybe feel we are reaching here is your McDonald's, for instance, where they are transforming the entire PO system, the point of sale system, into AI. The way I look at it, and I think I was listening to a podcast not too long ago, the analogy was, if you're a farmer and you have a cow and you milk it, you need to milk it such that you leave enough for the calf to be able to drink. And that's how you continue your stock and building your stock. But if you're going to milk the cow and milk it until it's infested and it's got bruises and cuts, etc., then that's how you're then reducing or maybe even limiting or cutting that lineage of that particular cow, because then the calf dies and then that's it, right? So the analogy was to explain that if the big corporates are investing heavily towards AI and reducing the masses right at the bottom of the hierarchy of the food chain, reducing them in the job market, or reducing job creations. So if McDonald's would have had 20 people, it's currently has 5 people. Those are 20 people that buy McDonald's. That's that target market. But if you're reducing it to 5, and that means 15 people of your total target market will not be able to afford McDonald's because you've moved AI. So, I'm using an extremity. I recognize I'm using an extremity. I think I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here. I say AI is great. I personally use it even in my office, and it's my turnaround time is incredible, and I love it for it. But I'm saying that we should be cognizant, and maybe also this is a less educated response. Maybe with time, as I'm reading and as I'm researching, I find out more how we're going to integrate, how it's not going to do what I feel is the worst case scenario.
I had a conversation with somebody earlier that, it's part of life. Any organization or any process seeks to self-develop to a point where we use less resources, but getting equal or even more output from this. So that's what you call going lean, you see, and it happens without AI. I think what AI did was it just doubled or even the process. It sped up the process in such a way that maybe nobody ever expected it.
Yes.
But we generally have, these companies go through restructurings where we look at certain processes of the company and we say, no, we don't think this is working well for us. We're going to have to let go of some people because now we're incorporating. That's what happened when the computer age came in. Yeah. That's what happened. It happens. But then I think what happened with AI, the problem is that it moved too many things at the same time. And now we saw a sped up version of what we usually have.
100%. Yeah. No, you're right. That what has happened is basic evolution, except it's at nano speed.
Yeah, no, 100%. Definitely.
But for a continent like ours, for a country such as Botswana, I think that's exactly what we need.
Yeah.
I think for us to catch up to
that was going to be my next point, actually. That for us to be able to catch up with the rest of the developing world, if we were to sit down as a country and then just unbox this AI thing, even for a population which is as small as ours, then if we could leverage on it, I think we could go far.
100%. 100%. And I think, I don't know. I'm just going to take a stab in the wind here. I think in us embracing it, it should start with the individual naturally. But I also think there has to be integration by government. We need to all be intentional, from private sector, government, and of course the individual themselves. I think I looked at the general job searches recently, and HR specialists are encouraging people to make sure that they integrate AI into their studies. Either there's some AI specialists that are getting hired, or within your own department or your own industry, just make sure that you go out for those AI courses. And yes, I think for a country like ours to catch up to Germany, to catch up to the UK, to catch up to America, whatever the case is, this for us is the answer. 100%.
Oh, no, definitely.
I agree with you.
I think I love what you said. I think I prefer that the conversation starts first with the people before it goes to government. Because when the people own the brand,
100,
then it's easy for government to tap on it, you see, and then say, no, this is us, this is what we're doing. Unlike the other way around.
Yes.
Where now maybe government people sit in an office somewhere and then decide, you know what, guys, this is our national brand.
Yes.
And then it's not really what is resonated on the ground.
It's not owned. Yeah.
I remember there was this one. What tagline was that? peace and tranquility back. And I think that was the first Netlania brand Botswana. Yeah, it talks about peace, we're a peaceful nation and all of that, but it didn't say much about anything. So you find that it lost a lot of meaning on actually, it being about what the people have and what they believe. Yeah, this is interesting. I actually wanted to be an architect at some point in my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Come on over, it's not too late.
Yeah, it's never too late.
Yeah.
If there's only one thing that can make me want to become one, I think I have a big passion for stadium architecture.
Yes.
Stadium architecture, I'm so fascinated by those things that I read up about them. I do a lot of research about what really goes into the design of stadiums, particularly football arenas. There's this new age type of a design where now it's not just about a football season lasts 9 months. So what then happens with the last quarter? What does the stadium do? During the rest, playing the World Cup or what have you. So football teams are turning their stadiums into like concert villas, multi-purpose use where now the people from the NFL can come in and then, they take out the football grass and then they insert the carpet, and what have you, and, having hospitals and hotels also situated somewhere there around.
Yeah.
Do you think this is something, Botswana, will we ever see it happening or
Man, that's a depressing question, actually. Well, as you're speaking, the reason why I'm smiling is this. It's easy to tell you're a football fan, you're a football fanatic. And the reason why is one of the pleasures of being a designer. I think this does not only apply to architecture, is you live vicariously through your client. So you have 1,001 lives. If I was to work with you and we were designing a stadium, for that entire duration I'll be living in your head. I become a football fanatic as well. So it's quite exciting, and it's the best way to become rich while you're poor, because I if I'm working with a rich client, then I'm moneyed for a few months or a few years. But your question is, do we have that here? I think we have potential of that. I don't know why we have not embraced architectural revival in Botswana. And I'm going to take it a step backwards. So we have vernacular architecture, which we don't preserve in Botswana.
What's vernacular architecture?
Our mud huts. That is built rantaful. So we've moved away from that due to evolution. It's understandable, but we lose a lot of heritage and teachable notes through that. We don't preserve our own architecture because we've never known how to preserve. No, let me correct that. We do know how to preserve our own architecture, but because of evolution, we've moved away from it. So I'll give you an example. I'll move away from the stadium, and I'll give you an example with the main mall. I think the main mall is probably a project that has been potentially revisited by a lot of architects. Some old professional architects that dream of going into that space and reviving that whole entire, because the potential it carries is enormous. It's unbelievable. But it's just never done. Maybe partly because those buildings are not government owned. They're privately owned. Maybe because the investment is not worth it. I don't know. I'm sure there are a bunch of reasons why. But you're particularly talking about the stadium. And I say, yes, I've looked into reclaimed stadiums, some that have been decommissioned and then turned into mixed-use spaces. where you have offices and you have accommodation as well. They're doing some incredible stuff out there. I think the voice is not loud enough here. I don't know if the limitations are money, but certainly the talent is there. That I guarantee. It's there. It's just we're limited because the funder ultimately is the one who dictates the direction of the project.
Yeah, man. You know, we touched on something quite interesting, Kantele, when you spoke about like the indigenous knowledge or indigenous architecture, and how is it a culture thing that we find ourselves really having maybe divorced and not even left anything. Like we should be having like a museum of our type of architecture, our type of Actually, I read a book, I think it's a book. Was it a book by Sandy Grant or Sandy Grant's
Yes,
wife?
yes.
Yeah, in a way about Hokapa.
Yeah.
In the olden days, we used to have, you'd finish building your item and then so even around the house, there used to be this it's like a stoop right around a mud hut, and then so how kapa there is a cow dung. So cow dung naturally, because the cattle eat grass, there's a strong roughage residue there. So, because people lived in the lands, this acted as a deterrent for snakes. Because as a snake wiggles its way into a particular place, what happens is that in the scales, and then it would render it immobile, so it wouldn't be able to move into the house. So such things. I read about that thing, and I was so mesmerized. Wow, it's not just about. It wasn't just about decorative purposes only. There was also musula thing. It had its useful function. That was actually a snake repellent and what have you. So, what can be done, or what is being done with regard to maybe recapturing all of this, and maybe taking it to a larger scale of having like a museum of sorts?
I think you're asking a question that I'm very passionate about. I write a lot about vernacular architecture and preserving it. Sandy Grant, may he rest in peace, is somebody who was very intentional about documenting our vernacular architecture. And he's done a great job, but he hasn't done enough, because I think there's still more to be done. He was bringing awareness that I feel that is still yet to be embraced, is embraced in corners, but the message is not loud enough. You're asking what can be done. I'm going to give you an example with our neighboring country, South Africa. When I was in South Africa, I remember there was an intentional move to preserving culture in all industries, all facets, and they marketed it. I don't know whether this came from the top to corporate and then disseminated it from there, or did it come from the bottom, that the people themselves are the ones who said, we are proud of our culture and we want to embrace. I'm giving an example, it's just South Africa, but I think other African countries have this.
I know the stories about Esther Mahlangu.
Yes, yes. And I remember while I was there, before there was that full revival, the old CBD, which is the taxi rank in South Africa right now, Joburg. It has a lot of buildings, dilapidated buildings. But if you go into those buildings, these things have marble walls. They have copper inlays in the walls, gold handles. They used to be high-end 5-star hotels downtown that are now being rented for short stay or long-term stay to students who rent at 500 rands. I don't know what the going market rate is right now. But I'm explaining this to say, when the intentional move towards revival was started, they were starting off with these canvases. You have people like Black Coffee who own a penthouse downtown. Maybe his attraction was the view, because it is scenic. Maybe it's the quality of the building that's pre-existing. So I think we need to, as individuals, as you, as me, to embrace our culture first, and then it will grow from there. You know, we saw this happening in buildings, the building clads, the marketing strategies in the marketing corporates were intentional. They are proudly South African. Tourism, short left, I think you remember that campaign. In terms of clothing, the big brands, YDE, sent out a memo and said, we want young designers to bring proudly South African interpretations of fashion. And they looked into patterns, they looked into how the clothes are made, they looked into the type of fabrics, you know, the designs. It's vast. That spilled over to music. Nobody was left behind. Music was intentional. And South Africa has its own genre, a number of genres for that matter. You know, they were very intentional. And like I said, I don't know where it began, but I do know it was a positive and very powerful movement on the streets, at street level. You know, you get to a traffic light and you've got like 4 kids at the traffic light dancing in Zulu, you know, Zulu dance at the traffic light, and then they get rewarded on the spot. So I feel like we need the same kind of energy. Until we embrace and until we're proud in that manner, loudly for that matter, I don't think it will quite transcend, you know. So your question is, what could be done? I think you need to embrace and I need to embrace Makhabi. Let's start there. I like that you touched on Hokap. When I was growing up, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and Narata Makhabu. And I think twice seasonally, if I remember correctly, Ona Akap. And one of those would be when we go during school holidays. And ke rata boskono ke nahela ke cleaner ke, you know, so una nahela ampeile ha tlase ga gagwe. So when ha go khapa, should always call me to help her, you know. So simola ka boloko jono jo ha ba mixa le mmu ba mmu wa sefiwa, you know. There's a lot of prep work that goes into it. You prep it quite a bit. You need to take out larger sediments. You need to, you know, you really need to work into it. And the whole entire time you need to make sure that it's wet, because that is not a one-day affair. It happens over a long time. And what she didn't do that I now know and have learned is that she had no stabilizer in her mixture. So a stabilizer could be lime, lime powder. If you put lime powder in there, it stabilizes, and then therefore it lasts longer. And that's something that we can mix into the mixture, you know, lobo, and there are patterns that she draws, you know, I don't know how, geometric patterns. And every season it'll be different. And you're right, there's the decorative aspect to it. And then there's the deterrent that you've touched on. But over and above that, the reason why it's done around Rantafoleo, it's called a skirting around the building.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a skirting around the building. What that skirt does is hameti apula anzana. It's protecting your foundation. So but I mean, I think we could learn a lot. You know, these are the very same practices we use in our modern day architecture that they figured out a long time ago. We didn't understand it, but it's protecting the foundation of the building. And there's a term called underpinning a building. House na stupu. And the water ponds, when water ponds, basically, if the falls, the levels, towards the main structure. And so the water then collects around your building or around your house, right? And it sits there. And I would even warn and say, make sure that you figure out a little stream to get the water away from
as quickly as possible.
Because what happens is that your foundation or your walls, they sponge the water. They take in the water. That's called ponding. It doesn't happen over 2 days. It doesn't happen over 3 days, but it weakens the mortar. It weakens the brick. And then you start seeing cracks, what we call hairline cracks. Those hairline cracks become structural cracks, and they go right down to mudi, or your foundation. And when that happens, the only way to save your house is to underpin. So for lack of a better word, it is to basically put a ring around your foundation or your house or your building so that it doesn't fall apart. If it's double story, you might have to do it at the first level and at the bottom. It depends. Some cases are worse than others, but you would have to underpin. And Moholo Amaloba understood this. We had to go to school to try and figure it out. And I'm sure if I had sat down with my grandmother for a little bit longer, she would have, imparted this knowledge. So yes, there's a lot that we can learn. A lot. Ventilation. Botswana is self-ventilating.
Oh, yes.
I mean, there's sciences to this thing.
There's a natural gap between the wall and the roof.
Yes. That gap will never bring in water. It won't bring in wind and dust. There's so many sciences to it. And I'm currently designing a building. I got very privileged to be involved in a project that embraces Setswana architecture and Setswana, but in a modern way, in a contemporary way. So it's going to be exciting, and hopefully in about a year's time, we should be in a position to reveal. But I definitely will keep you updated.
Beautiful. Let's talk about the residential architecture market, Botswana. Over the past few years, there's been your Pakalanis, your Setloas coming out, your Sarna cities of this world, Tobo Hamlet, Beto Estate, all of these estates coming up. We've seen beautiful houses. How's the market? What thing and what are the determinants and what have you? These middle to high cost houses, these double and triple stories. Just tell us a bit about that.
Okay, so I'm not an expert in that. I'm not very well versed, but I have enough information, I think, to share. We have a lot of multi-reses sprouting everywhere. It's very interesting. You're touching on that. I was doing research around town just yesterday, but not just book research. I was going around with an agent and going to these multi-reses because we have a fair amount of work in the office, multi-res wise. And One of the things that I highlighted was the trend is 1 bedroom, studio, and 2 room. They don't stay. They fly off the shelves. They're the first to go out to market and sell out. Property market sells like hotcakes. Okay. Property market sells so fast in Gaborone. But what's interesting is that 10 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I could be mistaken, a 2-bedroomed house with the spec that we currently have would have never really sold. Because with that very same money, you can go to phase 2 and get a standalone house. But the young professional now is buying into the amenities, into the security, into the location. They understand the power of the address. And they're quicker leaving that standalone house and going to buy a Sotloa, a 2-bedroomed house or apartment with 2 bathrooms. Limited windows, but they're buying into so much more. The address is key. We're looking at Bodulo. If you're investing in Bodulo in Pakalane is the most expensive square mile in Botswana currently. You're buying into the address. You're also buying into, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and find a daycare next to me. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and find a church next to me. It's key. You're buying peace of mind. You're buying peace of mind not only now, but in the near future. And if you're not a young professional buying for your own self or acquiring for self to live, it's a good investment. It's a good investment. Property market in Botswana is very expensive. What I can buy here for 1.8, 1.6, which is a standalone house, family house, 3 bedrooms, maybe 2 bathrooms, no pool, possibly, at 2 million, maybe inclusive of a pool. In South Africa, I'm buying 2,000 square meters, possibly. A larger square meterage, maybe 450 square meter house. To give you context, that is maybe double story, large master, walk-in closet, dining, office, formal lounge, informal lounge, large open plan kitchen, pool,
double garage,
and double garage. So that is the professional dream. That's my dream, So what I can get here and what I can get in South Africa, night and day. You get a lot more there. Our property market is expensive. It just is. But yeah, the developers they are responding to the market need, and the market is responding. What is not selling much are those family units. Those are not going. They're not going as fast as the young professionals need. What I believe is the young professionals need. Yeah.
Sesame, we've been at it for about an hour now. I think it's time to wrap it up. And do you have any last words, maybe to a young student out there who wants to go into this particular industry of yours? I think,
and I'm going to generalize it first, and I'm going to say while you are in high school or even in tertiary, before you go looking for school, AI is available for you to career search. They're out there, they're available. Look for them, ask. I'm sure you'll get an answer or two. Search first. Don't only search for your ideals. Populate into whatever AI system what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what your aspirations are. AI is so intelligent, and it uses all these skills that we probably possess and we don't know, but can give you an informed decision and good direction It doesn't stop only there. You can even further on ask what you might ask your mentor. If I'm doing marketing, if I'm doing architecture, what are the possibilities? What other jobs can I look into? Further to that, what are the marketable jobs and how much do they pay? All those metrics are available on AI. So that is my 2 cents. That's what I would advise any graduate, whether they're doing architecture, design, marketing, communications, or a secondary school student. I would say not only to a young graduate, I would say even to a secondary school student, you don't even need to be in Form 5. Hell, even better if you're in Form 2, so that it assists you to be intentional about what direction you go. You were asking me earlier, what courses do you need? What modules do you need? What subjects do you need at a secondary school level? If I was in Form 2, I would want to sit down and say, I really don't like chemistry, but I dig physics. Or I don't like any one of those, but I like drama and I like art and I like music, whatever the case is. Put that in there. It gives you a head start and it gives you direction. That's what I would have wanted, so that when I am in Form 4 and I get to a point where I am intentional about what direction to go, what subjects to go to do, and what level of maybe energy I want to put towards these subjects, I would have wanted that information at that point in time, so that when I am finished Form 5, I'm clear. And I have options. I have 4 options that, okay, if I'm artistic, I got digital, I got marketing, I've got media, I've got architecture, and then you take it from there. So that's my 2 cents. The AI platforms are there, they're out there. We've got local ones as well. Get on it, find out about them, and career search before you go too far.
Thanks a lot for your time, Sesame.
Thank you for having me.
I hope to have another engagement with you about what you would then be doing about, taking that baton from your grandma and actually playing your part in preserving our indigenous architecture.
That would be awesome. I would look forward to that conversation, yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cheers.